Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today I want to cover the artifact archetypes, or at least one of them, because I think they're pretty cool and very different from the other archetypes that are available in the system. What artifact archetypes are essentially an item which you are given by the GM, which grants you access to a specific archetype associated with that item. Note that these items are explicitly meant to be used with the free archetype rule. You can use them without free archetype, but they're sort of designed to be used with. Currently, there are only two artifact archetypes available, the Gelid Shard and the Ursine Avenger Hood. So in this video, I'm going to cover the Gelid Shard, which is basically a frozen shard of ice and snow, which grants you cold-themed powers. The Gelid Shard is itself an invested item and grants you a couple different bonuses and abilities separate from the archetype. First of all, you reduce the bonus you gain from any emotion effect, and the DC to make an impression or request, or to aid other people to do those things is increased. However, in exchange, you do gain a little bit of resistance to cold damage and a +2 status bonus to saves against any emotion effect that's trying to be inflicted upon you. Of note is that a lot of the Bard is built around giving emotion bonuses to their team. The initial Bard composition cantrip Inspire Courage is in fact an emotion effect which grants you bonuses. So if you have a Bard on your team, you might want to avoid trying to work on the Gelid Shard because it's going to be much harder for them to buff you up and support you as it will be for the rest of your team. But the real benefit of the Gelid Shard is obviously the archetype that comes with it. And because this is designed for use with free archetype, there is actually one feat for every single character level which you can take feats at. The first feat available to you is First Frost, which grants you spontaneous arcane spellcasting, which keys off of Charisma, as well as two cantrips, Frost Touch and Rare Frost. Frost Touch is actually a unique cantrip available only to the Gelid Shard archetype, and it is essentially a prestidigitation variant that lets you do some fun party tricks with ice, and if you're a creative player, you can probably get a decent amount of use out of the spell. Next up, we have Snowcaster, which just grants you the basic spellcasting benefits like any other spellcasting archetype. However, note that you are restricted to only arcane spells that have the cold trait, and this will be true for all spells that you choose with this archetype, even as we get to the higher level spellcasting feats. Next up, we have Snowstep, which lets you ignore difficult terrain and reduce greater difficult terrain from snow and ice, as well as leave no tracks when you travel through such areas. It feels a little difficult because even if you don't leave tracks, the rest of your party probably is still leaving tracks. But if you're on like a solo scouting mission through a wintry landscape, certainly leaving behind no tracks to follow you with is relatively useful. Next up, we have Frozen Breath, which increases the spells in our repertoire and spell slots from this archetype by 1 for all spell levels except for our 2 highest. So at this point, we will have 3rd level spell slots from the archetype, which means we gain a second 1st level spell slot and 1st level spell to cast spontaneously with. And obviously, as we take the higher spellcasting feats, those extra spell slots we get will also grow. Next we have Winter's Embrace, which gives us an additional bonus to saves against the dazzle condition, as well as allowing us to ignore concealment from snowfall, and to be protected from severe cold and heat. All these are very nice quality of life things, and when they come up, we'll be happy to have them. Next up, we have Expert Snowcasting, which is just the normal expert spellcasting feat, the same as the other spellcasting archetypes. After that is Winter's Kiss, which is kind of an upgrade of the Winter's Embrace that we had earlier, which now protects us from extreme cold and extreme heat, as well as gives us a little bit of resistance to fire. Next up, we have the successor to Snowstep, which is Greater Snowstep. This allows us to ignore all environmental effects and rely on cold arts byproducts, as well as greater difficult terrain from snow and ice. Up next is Master Spellcasting, which is just Master Spellcasting benefits. And finally, we have Icy Apotheosis, which grants us full immunity to cold damage, as well as the cold trait, and automatic success on all saves against cold effects. So, obviously, going through the archetype is a very strong cold theme tying everything together, which is extremely flavorful, but to be honest, a lot of the feats are fairly situational. They're only going to be really relevant if you're playing in a campaign that regularly embraces cold environments. Obviously, if you have the Gelid Shard, hopefully you're in that kind of campaign, because otherwise things like ignoring difficult terrain from snow or ignoring concealment from snowfall is going to be really difficult to come up. But of course, this is a spellcasting archetype, so we expect a lot of the power of the archetype to be tied up in our spell selection. Unfortunately for the Gelid Shard specifically, we are restricted to cold arcane spells. And if we look here at the search, the cold arcane spell list that we have access to is very small. There's only 11 results, and most of these are going to rely on our spell DC in some way. Cone of Cold, Eclipse Burst, Polar Ray, Snowball. These are all spells that require saves or attack rolls from us, which as a spellcasting archetype is going to be very, very low relative to the actual casters in our party. There are two notable exceptions. Mantle of the Frozen Heart just gives us a couple of buffs that last for a minute, and Wall of Ice is one of the classic wall spells, and as always, they are really good. However, these are both level 5 spells, which as a spellcasting archetype, we aren't going to get until character level 14, which is a very, very long time to wait for these spells. What this means is that you really need the archetype feats to actually be pulling weight in order for this to be more appealing than other spellcasting archetypes. If you are in a campaign where you're in a wintry wonderland and you're fighting in blizzards, the feats that you ignore concealment from snowfall, ignore difficult terrain from snow and ice, and ignore cold damage from environmental effects are obviously going to be extremely good. But that is a very niche circumstance and a relatively niche campaign. So, let's say we were in that type of campaign, and the GM offered us a Gelid Shard for us to build our character around. How would I take best advantage of this? Well, the first thing is, looking over the spell list, things like Cone of Cold, like Polar Ray, Snowball, Rhyme Slick, assuming your GM gets access to it, and even Chilling Spray. These are all actually legitimately good spells to take. Their only downside is that the spellcasting proficiency on our spellcasting archetype is going to be very poor. However, there is a way around that, which is by taking a full arcane caster as our actual class, because that way the arcane casting proficiency will be lumped together between the caster class that we are and the spellcasting archetype. In this way, we get the benefits of the full arcane casting proficiency and the additional spell slots and cool, flavorful feats that the Gelid Shard archetype gives us. Of the arcane casters available in the game, I am most attracted to the Summoner to pair with the Gelid Shard archetype. This is not a true full caster in the sense that they don't get legendary proficiency. They can be an arcane caster depending on which idol they choose, and their key ability score is Charisma, which stacks well because the Gelid Shard is also a charisma casting archetype, meaning that not only are we doubling up our spell tradition, we're also doubling up our key ability score. On top of that, the Summoner can make much better use of the extra spell slots than a true full caster would. On something like a Summoner, they already have a lot of spell slots, so getting a couple extra from the archetype are not that valuable, and they would be, in my opinion, much better served taking a different archetype to cover some of their weaknesses or fulfill a different niche. The Summoner, on the other hand, because it is a bounded spellcaster, lacks somewhat in spell slots, and so getting the couple extra from the spellcasting archetype is actually really useful for them. So, of the Summoner Eidolons, there are only two which grant arcane spellcasting. First, the Construct, and second, the Dragon. And the obvious choice for me is going to be Dragon. We can get ourselves a White Dragon Eidolon, which is cold affiliated, and take the Gelid Shard, embed it within ourselves, use the archetype, and have a really strongly cold themed character for ourselves to play. This is a pretty clear route, at least for me, to want to take the Gelid Shard archetype over other spellcasting archetypes. Because we're a cold themed character, and because the flavor is so strong within the Gelid Shard, taking the archetype is much more appealing than taking just kind of a generic wizard archetype or generic sorcerer archetype to help boost that spellcasting instead. So that's all for this week on the Gelid Shard and the archetype associated with it. Next time I'll look at the Ursine Adventurehood, the artifact archetype available in the system. So I hope you'll come back and watch that video when I release it, and I hope you enjoyed this video on the Gelid Shard. But most importantly, I hope you have a lovely day.